Thanks for joining us today. I'm Pastor Josh Barnes. This is Justin Barnes, and this is the show where we're unashamed to look at political, social, cultural, and theological issues from a biblical worldview. Now, we do that on the basis that Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. Now, as a Christian, of course we believe that Jesus died on the cross and rose from the dead. And if you're a Christian, then that should be that should be your starting point, because Jesus said the Bible's true. Obviously, he knew what he's talking about if he rose from the dead. And so then we can't be right about issues if we disagree with the Bible. Now, if you're an atheist, and I suspect with this episode, we may have many atheists watching. If you're an atheist, now we do need to take a step back and prove that Jesus rose from the dead. I think we can do that. We've done that on other episodes. I think there's lots of evidence that cannot be explained in no other way other than to say that Jesus really rose from the dead. We have we have the fact that there's consensus among scholars that Jesus was a real person, that he really died by the hand of the Romans, that his tomb was really found empty, that his enemies even changed their minds and became followers of Christ after claiming to see a risen Christ, and that his followers in groups of 500 at one time saw Jesus and had real experiences that they really believed was the risen Christ, that cannot be explained any other way than the fact that they really saw the risen Christ. So there's lots of detail to get into, but we can I think prove very clearly from historical documents that Jesus did in fact rise from the dead. So we think there's a really good reason to say Jesus not rose, and if he did, then he was right about the things he said, and when he said the Bible is true, he was right, and therefore this is our basis for saying we're right about issues, conservative things, okay? The reason I say all of that to start out with this time is because we want to review an organization we came across at CPAC this year, and that is Atheists for Liberty. And here's the two presidents there. I actually met Thomas Sheedy at Atheists for Liberty. The other leader there is Dave Silverman. And I talked to Thomas and I asked him if he would come on the show and actually give a response to this episode. And so what we're doing is that we're actually recording this episode, reviewing the organization Atheists for Liberty, showing what we think are inconsistencies with their view and conservatism. They say they're for conservatism and they're atheists. We say those things don't mesh. We're glad if they're atheists that they are voting conservative, but we think that they need to acknowledge that they're being inconsistent with their own worldview by doing that. So I'm going to give them, after we record this episode, I'm going to give him an opportunity to respond. He may not respond. You may see this, we may air this and have no response afterwards. And that would be completely up to Thomas. He said he was open to it, and he at the time indicated that he would come on the show to respond. We'll see. I've contacted him. Haven't heard anything back from him yet, although it's early. So we'll give him time, and hopefully that will be something that will actually happen. But looking forward to it if that takes place. Justin, this is an organization based on atheism that says that the principles and tenets of atheism are consistent with conservatism. I'm going to play just a few short clips from the founders. They actually founded it. It's 1 year old. They founded it at CPAC last year. I'm sorry, not last year, 2 years ago, in CPAC in 2020. And what are just your initial thoughts off the top of your head here as we're jumping into this?
Well, I've read a lot of stuff from their website, and I think that I feel very robbed because they're operating on my worldview to try to sustain their own. But we'll get into why I say that in a little bit.
Yeah. Okay, let me just play a clip of 2 years ago at CPAC, an interview that Thomas did I'm just going to play the beginning of an interview that he did here where he's explaining a little bit about the organization and what their key principles are. And then I'll also play an interview that Dave Silverman did with TP USA, Turning Point, and just so we can get an overview of what they say about their organization. Here we go.
We wanted to come here to say that you can be an atheist and be a conservative, that these are not contradictions, and that we are here to share values. We're here to say that we share values with plenty of conservative organizations that are already here, fighting for the individual, fighting for freedom of expression, fighting for religious freedom, to believe or not believe in a supernatural deity and a God. That's basically the one thing where I disagree from most of the attendees here. Yeah. Secular government, that's another huge thing that we incorporate into religious liberty. And overall, this is something that a lot of organizations, at least in organized atheism, is not really tackled. Coming to speak to the other 50% of the country and saying, hey, we want a country where religious freedom is protected as well. This is not a controversial thing. This shouldn't be controversial. But sadly, among many atheists and among what's taking over the social justice circles and the far left lately, we're seeing people care more about their ideology winning than the win of free thinking over dogma.
Many on the atheist side have been demonizing conservatives for years, not even willing to have the conversation.
Yeah, I think that was a mistake. I tried to never do it, even when I was more of a lefty. I can't say that I never did it, but I tried not to do it that much. But I think in an odd way, when you've railed against religious people for so long, and then suddenly you realize they're not the enemy, well, then you have to have a real mea culpa moment. And I think for a lot of people, having the humility to do that is not easy. So I think for you guys, again, it's just be open enough to accept the refugees, and I think some good things will happen.
And we're fighting against the new religion of wokeness. Many things we have in common.
Wokeness is a far scarier religion than any religion that I know in America today. I will tell you that much. And there's no traditional religion in America today that's trying to infect all of our institutions, that's trying to destroy education, destroy all of our cultural institutions, destroy our media institutions. There's one, and it's wokeness.
Right.
Okay, so that gives you an idea of kind of what they say about their organization. I think that second interview I could have backed up a little bit and had a little bit more from Dave Silverman about the organization, about Atheists for Liberty. We're going to read a little bit of their values page. Is it do they call it values? Principles. Their principles page from their website.
Yeah. Real quick question: was that Silverman on the right? Because I know that was Dave Rubin on the left in that second interview.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that was Silverman on the right. I'm going based on the video that I found on YouTube when I found this. It doesn't say. It says it's Dave Rubin interviewing somebody from Atheists for Liberty.
Okay.
And I'm looking at the picture that's 2 years later of actually this was posted last year, February 2021. So, but I'm looking at the picture of Dave Silverman, and I'm fairly confident that it's Dave Silverman, although I don't see it tagged in the actual video. So I'm gonna just qualify this and say I'm not confident, but I do believe that's Dave Silverman. His hair's different now. If it is Dave Silverman, yeah.
I've watched David Silverman debates before. That's why he didn't look like what I remember, but I could be wrong on that.
And I could be wrong. I could definitely be wrong. But anyway, whoever that was, he was representing Atheists for Liberty, and that gives you an idea of what they're about. So their argument is that it's not inconsistent with conservatism. We believe in limited government. We believe in all of these things. And their list of beliefs and principles are listed on their website: individual liberty, religious freedom, a free exchange of ideas, the Constitution, secular government. Now, I'm going to try to get actually really deep in this and ask the question that I think, should come to our minds, and that is, why are those good things? On atheism, why is limited government a good thing? Why is personal freedom a good thing? How is this consistent with atheism that you have any kind of principles? This is what they said. They call it their principles on their page, which means these are our standards. These are things that are right. We want everyone to do this, to be for individual liberty. This is our principle that we stand on. But atheism says that we come from evolution. There is no God involved. That we are just sort of an amalgamation of chemicals. We have desires that really are just chemical firings in our brain. They don't come from God. They don't have a standard or a grounding in religion or in a higher power. They all come really from ourselves and from the universe. And so based on that, why do we say that individual liberty is right? Why don't I just do whatever makes me feel good? And if that means opposing someone else's individual liberty, why shouldn't I just do that? Because I'm just following the chemical makeup that I have from the universe, right? Why was Hitler wrong to go after the Jews on atheism? Because he was just following the chemical firings in his brain that he wanted to follow. Someone says, well, because the principles of individual liberty help preserve the species. Why does that matter? Why should I care about the preservation of the species if I'm just an amalgamation of chemicals that came from nowhere and is going nowhere? Right? When I die, what the heck do I care if the species goes on? Why should I care? Maybe I do care because evolution has created me to care. But why should I not reject that caring for the race and instead just live for myself? Why is it right to care for the race or to go for individual liberty or any of these things? Why are those things right and the opposite wrong? And I don't think you can find an answer in atheism. What are your thoughts on that, Justin?
Well, I mean, fundamentally what you're asking is according to what standard? This is the question that I want to clarify for an atheist listening, because oftentimes this devolves into getting really offended really quick. We're not making the claim that an atheist can't live in a moral way.
Right.
That an atheist will just go out and murder everybody or anything like that. We're not saying an atheist cannot do moral things. I am saying that it is not consistent with the worldview. So when you say individual liberty is good, atheism provides you no foundation for that. In fact, I would argue atheism based on just pure, evolutionary biology and Big Bang Theory and time and chance acting on matter, that sort of thing. If you're going to be a consistent atheist, you have to be like Richard Dawkins, who says there is no good or bad, it's just blind and pitiless indifference. If you're willing to go there, okay, but then you have to get rid of individual liberty as a good, because it's not a good, there is no good. But if you're going to say individual liberty is good, I would say you're borrowing from the Christian worldview. Because in atheism, the only thing I could actually rationally defend, and I want to think consistently through issues. If I was an atheist and I had to rationally defend a position, I would defend things like slavery. Not because I think they're good, but because evolution is all about survival of the fittest. The stronger, the more well-suited to their environment, that sort of thing, survive, the weak die off, and that's how the species improves and gets better, and the better genes stay in the pool, that sort of thing. If I can subjugate the ones that are less powerful than me, why would I not do that in atheism? What on earth could possibly be wrong with that? Now, you might think it's horrible and you're empathetic and things like that, but there's no basis for those things to be real or valuable or valid in any way. The only way you can have something like individual liberty or any sort of freedom of any kind, or even heck, not raping somebody or not murdering them, the only way you can have any of that is if there is a standard to which there is an objective way we can measure this. The question always is it actually good or bad? Not is it good based on the standard of what our culture thinks or what will propagate the species, but is it, if you boil it all down, is this actually good or bad? And atheism has to say, if it's consistent, no, there's no such thing as actually good or bad. Rape and murder a child, we might not like it, it's not actually good or bad.
Yeah. To dive a little deeper into that, and again, I want to reiterate what you said, because I probably was not clear about that at the beginning. What we're not saying is that atheists can't be conservatives. We're saying that atheism doesn't lead one logically to conservatism, that is inconsistent with the idea of atheism. And we're not saying that you have to have a relationship with God or to believe in God to do what's right. But when you do what is right, you are by nature showing that there is an instinct that tells you that there is an objective morality which doesn't come from atheism. It has to come from some other concept. Even if you don't believe in that concept, you are acting as if that concept is true. And so the argument, it's what we call the moral argument for the existence of God. The argument is based on two premises. Premise number one, that if objective morality exists, let me put it that way. If objective morality exists, then God exists. And number two, objective morality exists, so God exists. So the idea is, if there is morality that is objective, meaning it's not because it's influenced by nature, it's not because it's what's best in this situation, it's like always true. So, rape, is rape always wrong? If it is, why is it always wrong? You don't get that from nature? Animals rape each other all the time. Is torturing a baby for fun always wrong? You don't get that from nature. In nature, sometimes things eat their children. Is murdering your husband after having sex with him wrong? You don't get that from nature. Spiders actually do that, right? I mean, are there things that are wrong all the time? Because if that's the case, then it doesn't come from nature. It doesn't come from natural causes. It doesn't come out of necessity, because if it came from necessity or what's best for our race, then as soon as it was better for our race to do something different, it would no longer be wrong. Like, Hitler, who thought that it was best to murder all the Jews, right? So if there is objective morality that is always wrong, it points us to a higher standard that says this is always wrong. And if you say there's no objective morality, then I'm going to ask you, is it okay in certain situations? When is it okay to torture a baby for fun? When is it okay to rape? When is it okay to murder? When are these things okay then? If there's no objective morality. And then once you say it's never okay, I'm going to say, okay, well then if it's never okay, there is objective morality. Where do you find the grounding for that other than God? So all of that is sort of the preface to this. Sorry, I hit my microphone, which probably sounds weird on your end. All of that is the foundation for this argument, and that is conservatism is based on what was correctly identified by Atheists for Liberty and by Thomas as principles. We see it on their website. It's based on solid principles. What is right? What is wrong? It is wrong for the government to steal my property and to give it to someone else. It is wrong for the government to infringe on my liberty. It is wrong for the government to say this, to show favoritism. These are things that are wrong. This is what conservatism is based on. And I say, as an atheist, how could you possibly be a conservative? How could you possibly say there are things that are right or wrong? That's my simple argument.
Well, here's the thing. My assumption would be, because again, I want to try to think through how I don't want to address the weakest arguments the other side could possibly present. I want to think through what do I think is probably the best thing they could say.
Yep.
If I was them, I would probably say something, and if he wants to come on to explain it, feel free. But it's probably something to this extent of, well, I want to have religious freedom. I want to have individual liberty. So if I want to have that, then I have to offer it to others, because, if we need to make an even playing field here. But that's, again, where I say atheism doesn't offer you the principle of an even playing field. In fact, it offers you, strictly speaking, from the secular perspective, the exact opposite. The stronger propagate their genes into the next generation, the better mutations and the better genetic makeups continue into the next generation, and they dominate the weaker. That is evolution. That is atheism. So individual liberty is inherently not an atheist value. If you're strictly on the worldview of atheism, when you have to start borrowing from other worldviews to support the things that you believe are right, you know your worldview is not right, or your values aren't right. Pick one. You can't have them both. This is the constant frustration is, I'm not saying you can't do something moral, but I am saying you're stealing from my worldview in order to do it.
Yeah.
You have to be consistent.
So the Christian worldview has a basis for why we think things are right or wrong, because God created the world and he created it for a purpose. And he said, this is against my purpose. This is wrong. Right. The atheist worldview doesn't have that foundation. And that's what we're arguing. Now, to be clear, I actually talked to Thomas at CPAC, and I in a very extremely brief conversation, I said, listen, I think that if you're going to be atheist, and I don't think you should be atheist, I think you're wrong to be atheist, but I think if you're going to be atheist, we're happy to have you vote conservative. We want the votes, absolutely, we'll accept the votes, but we do think that this is inconsistent and ultimately bad for the party, because if we have more and more people saying, no, be atheists and be conservative, then what we're doing is we're tearing out the foundation for our principles and saying, just hold the principles without any actual reason. And here's one of the big points that he emphasizes. You even heard it, Thomas, when he was in that interview 2 years ago. He emphasizes free thinking and logic, which, first of all, I would say, why is free thinking good? Why do you know that free thinking is good instead of listening to dogma? Why would one be better than the other on atheism, right? I mean, there's not really a foundation for why that's good. But even if it were good, you say free thinking is good versus dogma, but yet the conservatism principle is individual liberty. Okay, free thinking, individual liberty, religious freedom, free exchange of ideas. You see how the word free keeps coming up? Well, what if somebody wants to freely do something that is wrong? Are you to say that whatever they want or whatever they think, they're free to think and want? Well, no, because there comes a point where that's actually wrong and damaging and bad and hurtful. And we all know this. We all know that a rapist should not be free to rape. We all know that a thief should not be free to steal. We all know that a murderer should not be free to murder. So there is a limit on our freedom. And where does that limit come from? It doesn't come from an atheist worldview, which I think is the problem. But let's deal piece by piece through this. Individual liberty. He says life. I say he, but Thomas probably didn't write all of this. So I'm just saying this is what's on the Atheist channel, on the Atheist page. Life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness are fundamental human rights, guaranteed to each and every individual. As Jefferson so eloquently put, these natural rights are self-evident and shared by all humanity. Regardless of race, creed, color, or political beliefs, we are naturally free people, free to think, speak, feel, believe, and act any way we choose, as long as it doesn't infringe on others' liberties. The individual is the smallest, most precious minority, and through the practice of reason and truth, liberty must be protected. But here's the thing. On atheism, even if you go on naturalism and you say it's for what's best for the society, that means the individual doesn't matter at all. Matter of fact, the individual can be sacrificed for whatever is best for society if that's your standard for morality. So this is a little bit odd, actually, an odd way to argue for atheist principles.
Also, did an atheist really use the term fundamental human rights? Do you know what that means?
It means there's a foundation right for human rights.
Inherent to the person. Problem. Bags of chemicals don't have fundamental anything. They don't. The reason that in America we have fundamental human rights is because humans are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. The only reason fundamental human rights exist, period, is because God gave it to them. This is in Christianity. We're made in the image of God. There's certain things inherent to us because of our God. You don't get that if you're an atheist. You can't. Again, see, you have to steal from my worldview in order to oppose my worldview. You don't get fundamental human rights if you don't have God. Sorry, pick one.
And by the way, it is Christianity. Now, not all Christianity throughout all history, but it is Christianity that argues for free thinking, or should argue for free thinking. There are many Christians who would not argue for it. But the scriptures over and over in the Bible does it talk about how this must be true. Like, there's prophecies, and then there shows the fulfillment of prophecies to show this is true. Jesus, when he came, he refused to call himself the Christ. He just referred people to what he was doing to show that he was fulfilling prophecies. And he said, listen, you need to know, not because I said so, but because you have a free thinking mind who says this is fulfillment of prophecy. I mean, this is what Christianity is really based on. Even Paul wrote saying, look, if the resurrection isn't true, if Jesus didn't really rise from the dead, the whole thing's in vain, pack it up and go home. We want this has to be true, or just forget about it. So they were convinced, the early church was convinced that it was true. Christianity is based on freely thinking through and saying, look at the evidence, this proves that this is true. Now, a lot of Christians don't treat it that way, but that's really where free thinking comes from. I don't know why, again, to the point I made earlier, I don't know why dogma or teaching, that's what dogma means, teaching is wrong versus thinking free from teaching is right on atheism. I mean, what if the teaching is right? I just don't see why that would be a right thing. I don't know why there'd be anything right, but specifically why free thinking is necessarily correct. I don't know.
Also, it's an interesting dogma to think that dogma isn't as good as free thinking.
Yeah, that is a dogma. Exactly. That's a good point. That's a fair point. Religious freedom. In America, we have the right to believe or not believe in gods, and that's a wonderful thing. The free exercise clause of utmost importance of our country's survival. America was founded on the concept of religious freedom, and that means all have the right to our own beliefs as long as we don't infringe on others' liberties. America prospers. It's not complicated. I agree, but hang on. Why would you not want to infringe on others' beliefs? So why is that a good thing, not infringing on others' beliefs? I mean,
why was Caesar wrong for making everyone believe he's a god? Because it gave him more power over them. Why was that wrong? Because that wasn't religious freedom. You didn't have religious freedom in Rome.
Yeah, and he would probably say, I would assume that his response would be because individual liberty is right. And again, we'd go back to our foundational thing about why is it right, right?
See previous.
Right. So, yeah, we agree, but again, we're going to argue that there's no foundation for this, that atheism contradicts that. Not atheists. Atheists can believe this, and I know many of them do. I'm saying that atheism is fundamentally contrary to this.
Atheism. Consistent atheism.
Being consistent.
You have to be consistent.
And we glory. We're very happy that you're being inconsistent with atheism. But we do want to point out that it is inconsistent with atheism. So that's that. Free exchange of ideas, the First Amendment. We don't have a whole lot of time left. I'm not sure how much time we have left here to do this. The Constitution. The Constitution, interestingly enough, it does mention God and the Creator. So it's interesting that that's one of their principles, that America was designed to not only help the individual thrive, but also to protect the individual from government. Without liberty, America wouldn't exist. I think we've said most of what needs to be said there. We got about a minute left. Justin, I want to get something in here.
Yeah, last one is secular government. They say baked into the founding concepts of religious freedom is the important idea that religion and government should be as separate as possible. The separation of church and state, not in the Constitution. It's in a letter to the Danbury Baptists, had nothing to do with how people use it these days. B, the Bible is constantly referenced in our founding documents for states, from the Supreme Court referencing the biblical law for the for status of our laws. The idea was never separation of God and government. It was always the government is under God as a servant of God, but no single religion, no single denomination should rule over the government. They don't rule over each other. They're separate spheres of authority. This idea of a secular government is not American. It is not the founding principles, and you can't just make it up and say, hey, an atheist government is actually the American government. No.
Yeah,
not at all.
That's
Not
really
even
important,
close.
because he's going to argue when it comes to masks and COVID stuff that atheists should be treated like a religion in order so they could get religious exemption. But then when it comes to government, no, atheism should be the religion of the government because it's not a religion. That's all the time we have for today. We'll see you next time on Point of View.